In the heart of an ordinary American city, the wheels of justice turn daily, unnoticed by most. But on this particular morning, an encounter at the courthouse doors would challenge everything we think we know about power, race, and the law. The officer on duty sees his role as straightforward: secure the courthouse, screen everyone who enters, and ensure that order is maintained. But what begins as routine quickly veers into an exchange that defies explanation. The officer stops a black woman at the door, questioning her intentions for entering. To him, she's an unfamiliar face, one that doesn't immediately fit his assumptions about authority or power. Unaware of her role within these very walls, he begins to question her legitimacy, his tone growing firmer. The woman remains calm, quietly asserting her right to proceed. What happens next will not only shock those present but ignite a conversation across the country. This moment is not isolated. For generations, race has shaped the way authority is perceived and exercised, especially in spaces meant to uphold justice. The courthouse, a symbol of equality under the law, has too often been a stage where bias and power collide. Why did this officer stop her? What assumptions were at play? And what does it reveal about the invisible barriers that still exist within systems designed to be fair? This story isn't just about a moment of misunderstanding or misplaced authority. It's about the ripple effects that such moments create, sparking questions, igniting debates, and forcing us to confront the uncomfortable truths about the systems we trust. Before we uncover the full story, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Your engagement helps us bring more untold stories like this to light. It's 8:15 a.m. The courthouse is already alive with activity. Lawyers rush in, clutching briefcases and papers. Jurors trickle through security, many glancing nervously at their phones. Amid the bustle, Officer James, a seasoned deputy with 15 years on the force, stands at his usual post near the main entrance, watching over the flow of people. Today is just another day for him, or so he thinks. Across the street, Judge Lisa Carter, dressed in her favorite navy blue pantsuit and carrying a slim leather briefcase, exits her car. She's confident but focused, her mind running through the long docket awaiting her inside. As she approaches the courthouse, she joins the stream of people heading toward the entrance, blending in with the crowd. But unlike the others, her presence is about to provoke an unexpected reaction. Officer James notices her. She's unfamiliar, someone he hasn't seen before. His training has taught him to identify patterns, to notice when something feels out of place. And in that moment, he decides to act. "Excuse me, ma'am," he says firmly, stepping forward to block her path. Judge Carter looks up, surprised but composed. "I need to see some ID." His tone is professional but edged with authority. The kind of tone that implies compliance is not optional. Judge Carter pauses, instinctively reaching for her badge. She's been through security hundreds of times, often without incident. But today feels different. She hands over her ID, offering a polite smile. "Here you go, officer. I'm Judge Carter. I'm presiding over a case this morning." Officer James glances at the ID, his brow furrowing slightly. It's a valid badge, but something doesn't sit right with him. He hesitates, then looks back at her. "You're a judge?" he asks, his tone slightly skeptical. Carter nods. "Yes, I've been on the bench here for 3 years." For a moment, there's silence. The kind of silence that draws the attention of nearby onlookers. People begin to slow their pace, their eyes darting toward the interaction. Judge Carter stands tall, calm but aware of the mounting tension. Meanwhile, Officer James seems to weigh his options. Should he let her pass, or dig deeper? Finally, he makes his decision. "I'm going to need you to wait here for a moment," he says, stepping back and signaling to another officer nearby. Judge Carter's smile fades. "Is there a problem?" she asks, her voice still measured but tinged with irritation. "I'm already running late for court." The second officer approaches, exchanging a quick glance with James before addressing Carter. "Ma'am, we're just following protocol. This won't take long." Carter sighs, knowing all too well what's really happening here. She's seen it before, experienced it before. But this time, it's happening to her, in a place where she's supposed to hold the highest authority. As the minutes tick by, the crowd around them grows. Whispers ripple through the gathering onlookers, some recognizing Judge Carter, others merely curious about the delay. Meanwhile, Carter remains composed, though her patience is visibly wearing thin. She finally speaks up, "Officer, I've shown you my ID. If there's no legitimate reason to hold me here, I'd like to proceed to my courtroom." Officer James, sensing the growing tension, finally relents. "Fine, ma'am. You can go," he says, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Carter takes her badge back, nodding curtly before stepping past him and into the courthouse. But the damage has been done. The murmurs of the crowd follow her through the doors, and the weight of the moment lingers long after she's gone. This interaction, brief as it was, would soon spark questions far beyond the courthouse walls. Questions about authority, assumptions, and the lines that are too often drawn based on nothing more than skin color. But what happened after this encounter would leave an even deeper impression on everyone involved, and on the system itself. To truly understand the significance of that moment at the courthouse doors, we need to look back. Back to the lives of two individuals whose paths converged that day, Officer James Mitchell and Judge Lisa Carter. James Mitchell grew up in the small town of Roxville, a place where traditions ran deep and change came slowly. His father, a retired police officer, often spoke of honor and duty, values James absorbed early on. After high school, James joined the police academy, eager to follow in his father's footsteps. By the time he was stationed at the downtown courthouse, he had built a reputation as a diligent officer, known for his strict adherence to rules. But there was another side to James's story, one less visible, but no less impactful. Growing up in Roxville, James's interactions with people of other races were limited. His community was predominantly white, and his worldview was shaped by the stories he heard and the experiences he lacked. Implicit biases, though never openly acknowledged, seeped into his understanding of people and the world around him. To James, his actions at the courthouse were just part of his job, enforcing security protocols. But to others, those actions reflected something far more systemic, a pattern that had played out countless times before. Lisa Carter's journey couldn't have been more different. Born and raised in the bustling city of New Haven, Lisa grew up surrounded by diversity but also by stark reminders of inequality. Her parents, both educators, instilled in her a deep respect for knowledge and justice. They often spoke about the civil rights leaders who had paved the way for her generation, and Lisa took their words to heart. As a young girl, Lisa excelled academically, but even in her successes, she faced challenges. She vividly remembers a teacher doubting her ability to join the debate team, suggesting she might feel more comfortable in another extracurricular activity. Lisa proved him wrong, not only joining but becoming one of the team's most formidable speakers. These moments of subtle and overt discrimination fueled her determination to succeed in spaces where she wasn't expected to thrive. After earning her law degree from one of the country's top universities, Lisa began her career as a public defender, working tirelessly for those who couldn't afford proper representation. Her empathy and fierce advocacy didn't go unnoticed, and within a decade, she was appointed as a judge. By the time she arrived at the downtown courthouse 3 years ago, Judge Carter had built a reputation for fairness, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to justice. But even with her robes of authority, Lisa knew the challenges didn't disappear. She often reflected on the double burden she carried, as a black woman in a predominantly white and male field. She understood the expectations placed upon her, the unspoken pressure to be twice as good, twice as careful, and twice as patient in the face of bias. And yet, nothing had prepared her for what she encountered that morning with Officer Mitchell. For James, the interaction ended as just another encounter, quickly forgotten as he moved on with his duties. But for Lisa, it lingered. After presiding over her morning cases, she found herself replaying the scene in her mind, questioning whether she had done enough to address the deeper issues at play. She thought about the people watching, about the unspoken message sent to them when a black woman of authority was treated with doubt and skepticism. That evening, Lisa decided to act. She drafted a letter to the courthouse administration, recounting the incident not with anger, but with clarity. She emphasized the importance of training officers to recognize and confront implicit bias, framing her argument as a call for improvement rather than a condemnation. Lisa's approach was measured, rooted in her belief that change could only come through understanding and accountability. Meanwhile, James remained unaware of the letter or the discussions it would ignite among courthouse leadership. It wasn't until weeks later, during a mandatory training session on bias awareness, that James learned his actions that morning had become a case study, one used to highlight the very issues he had never fully considered. As James sat in that session, listening to stories from colleagues and experts, he began to reflect on his own behavior. It wasn't easy. Admitting that his actions might have been influenced by assumptions he didn't even realize he held was a humbling experience. But for the first time, he started to see the world through a different lens, one shaped not just by rules and protocols, but by empathy and self-awareness. For Lisa, the goal was never to punish or humiliate. Her focus remained on creating a system where such interactions wouldn't happen in the first place. A system where authority didn't depend on appearances, and respect was given to all who entered the halls of justice. This backstory, rich with contrasts and complexities, reveals more than just the roots of an encounter. It shines a light on the broader systems at work, the invisible forces that shape our perceptions, our decisions, and ultimately, our society. And yet, the story doesn't end here. What unfolded next would push these two individuals even further, challenging not only their beliefs but also the very fabric of the system they served. It began quietly. After Judge Lisa Carter submitted her letter, the courthouse administration initiated a review process. They held private discussions, reached out to consultants specializing in bias training, and quietly scheduled a series of workshops for all courthouse staff. To outsiders, these steps might have seemed minor, but for those inside the system, they marked a seismic shift, an acknowledgement that something needed to change. But while the administration acted behind closed doors, the story had already begun to spread. A clerk who had witnessed the incident mentioned it to a reporter. Soon, a local news outlet picked up the story, framing it as an example of the ongoing challenges faced by black professionals in positions of authority. Within days, it became a talking point on social media, sparking heated debates about race, respect, and the responsibilities of law enforcement. Officer James Mitchell found himself at the center of this storm. His name wasn't mentioned in the initial coverage, but within his department, the whispers were unavoidable. Some colleagues offered quiet support, suggesting he'd simply done his job. Others, however, were less forgiving, arguing that his actions reflected poorly on all officers. James tried to stay focused on his work, but the scrutiny began to weigh on him. For the first time in his career, he questioned not just his actions that day, but the principles that had guided him up to that point. He started to wonder, had he truly been fair? Or had he allowed biases he hadn't even recognized to influence his judgment? Meanwhile, Judge Carter found herself navigating a different kind of challenge. While she appreciated the administration's efforts to address the issue internally, she couldn't ignore the public's reaction. People reached out to her, some with words of support, others with skepticism, questioning whether she had overreacted or misunderstood the situation. Carter responded with her characteristic calm, emphasizing the need for constructive dialogue rather than divisive rhetoric. Then came the unexpected invitation. A local community organization, inspired by the story, reached out to both Judge Carter and Officer Mitchell. They proposed a public forum, a chance for the two of them to share their perspectives and engage in an honest conversation about race, authority, and accountability. At first, both were hesitant. James worried about facing public criticism, while Lisa questioned whether such a discussion could truly lead to meaningful change. After days of deliberation, they both agreed. The event was scheduled for a Friday evening at a packed community center. Hundreds attended in person, while thousands more tuned in via live stream. The stage was simple: 2 chairs, a small table between them, and a moderator who promised to keep the conversation respectful and focused. The tension in the room was palpable as the event began. James spoke first, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. He described his background, his years of service, and the principles that had guided him throughout his career. He admitted that the incident with Judge Carter had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own perceptions. "I've always believed in fairness," he said, looking out at the audience. "But I realize now that fairness isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding the impact of our actions on others. And in that moment, I failed to do that." Lisa Carter followed, her tone measured and thoughtful. She spoke not just about the incident itself, but about the broader experiences that had shaped her life. "What happened that day wasn't just about me," she said. "It was about the countless people who face similar challenges every day, often without the power or platform to speak out." The conversation that followed was raw and unfiltered. Audience members shared their own stories, some praising the courage it took for both Carter and Mitchell to engage in this dialogue, others challenging the systemic issues that allowed such incidents to occur in the first place. Through it all, the two remained committed to listening, to each other, and to the. By the end of the night, something remarkable had happened. While the forum didn't resolve every issue or erase the pain caused by the incident, it opened a door. A door to understanding, accountability, and the possibility of change. For James, it was the start of a personal journey to unlearn biases and rebuild trust. For Lisa, it was a reaffirmation of her belief in the power of dialogue to bridge even the deepest divides. This moment, this turning point, would resonate far beyond the walls of the community center. It became a blueprint for others, reminder that even in the face of division, there is room for growth, understanding, and, ultimately, justice. In the weeks following the public forum, the ripple effects of that conversation were felt in ways neither Judge Carter nor Officer Mitchell could have anticipated. The video of the event went viral, drawing attention from activists, educators, and even policymakers across the country. People from all walks of life weighed in, some commending their bravery, others criticizing what they perceived as a soft approach to accountability. But amidst the noise, real change was quietly beginning to take root. At the courthouse, a new training program was implemented for all staff, one that went beyond surface-level discussions of bias and instead focused on deep, practical strategies for recognizing and dismantling prejudice. Officers, clerks, and even judges attended mandatory workshops, where they participated in role-playing exercises, heard first-hand accounts of discrimination, and engaged in facilitated discussions about their own assumptions. For Officer James Mitchell, these sessions were both challenging and transformative. Sitting alongside colleagues he had worked with for years, he found himself confronting parts of himself he had never examined before. One particular exercise, where participants were asked to step into scenarios from perspectives different from their own, left a lasting impression on him. "I always thought of myself as fair," he admitted during one session. "But fairness isn't just about treating everyone the same. It's about recognizing that not everyone starts from the same place." This realization marked a turning point for James, one that would inform his approach to his work for the rest of his career. Judge Lisa Carter, too, saw the aftermath of their encounter ripple through her own life. Invitations poured in for her to speak at universities, legal conferences, and community events. She shared her story not to center herself, but to highlight the systemic challenges that needed addressing. Her message was clear: lasting change required both individual accountability and collective action. Outside of the courthouse, the community itself began to shift. The public forum inspired similar events in neighborhoods across the city, where people came together to share their experiences and brainstorm solutions. Local organizations formed partnerships with law enforcement, offering workshops and mentoring programs designed to bridge gaps and foster understanding. But not all reactions were positive. For some, the incident became a flashpoint for frustration and anger, with critics on both sides accusing Carter and Mitchell of either going too far or not far enough. Social media amplified these voices, creating an environment where meaningful dialogue often struggled to rise above the din of outrage. Yet, through it all, both Carter and Mitchell remained committed to the work of change. For James, this commitment meant stepping beyond his role as an officer to become an advocate for reform within his department. He began volunteering with local youth programs, speaking candidly about his own journey and encouraging young people to pursue careers in law enforcement. "We need more people who understand the communities they serve," he told one group of students. "People who can see beyond stereotypes and treat everyone with the dignity they deserve." Lisa, meanwhile, focused her efforts on policy reform. She worked with city officials to introduce measures aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within the justice system. One initiative, a program that allowed community representatives to sit in on courthouse staff meetings and provide feedback, became a model for other cities. As months turned into years, the impact of that fateful encounter continued to resonate. Carter and Mitchell's story became part of training curriculums, legal seminars, and even classroom discussions, used as a case study in how small moments can reveal larger truths. Their willingness to confront their own biases and work toward change inspired countless others to do the same. But perhaps the most profound change was the relationship that developed between Carter and Mitchell themselves. What began as an uncomfortable confrontation had grown into an unlikely partnership. They often collaborated on community initiatives, using their story as a testament to the power of honest dialogue and mutual respect. Together, they showed that progress wasn't just possible, it was necessary. In the end, the aftermath of that courthouse encounter proved that no system is too entrenched to change, and no individual is beyond redemption. It reminded everyone who heard their story that justice is not a static ideal but a living, evolving pursuit, one that requires courage, humility, and the willingness to listen. As the years passed, the events of that day became a defining moment in the lives of Judge Lisa Carter and Officer James Mitchell, but also a beacon for those seeking to understand and dismantle systemic bias. The courthouse, once a silent witness to countless interactions shaped by unspoken prejudice, began to transform into a space that encouraged openness, learning, and accountability. For Judge Carter, the legacy of her experience was about more than just personal growth. She began working on a groundbreaking initiative to create a mentorship program for young legal professionals from underrepresented communities. The program not only provided guidance for aspiring lawyers and judges but also fostered a pipeline for systemic change within the judicial system itself. "We can't expect change if we don't actively create opportunities for those who bring diverse perspectives to the table," Carter often said during her speeches. Her mentorship program became a model for other jurisdictions, a living testament to her belief in the power of preparation and representation. Meanwhile, Officer Mitchell's journey of reflection turned into a mission of advocacy. He became one of the department's most vocal proponents for bias training, using his own story to encourage his colleagues to confront their assumptions and learn from their mistakes. "I wasn't perfect, and I'm still not," he admitted during one training session. "But I know now that growth starts with admitting where we fall short." The impact of their work didn't stop at the courthouse or police department. Across the city, their story inspired new conversations and initiatives aimed at bridging the divide between law enforcement and the communities they served. Neighborhood watch groups began partnering with police officers for joint safety initiatives. Schools invited officers to speak about their experiences, while community leaders hosted open forums to address long-standing grievances. Still, not everyone embraced the changes. Criticism persisted, with some dismissing their efforts as symbolic or insufficient. Lisa and James, however, remained undeterred. They understood that progress was never linear, that each step forward often came with pushback. But they also believed that the conversations sparked by their story were worth the challenges they faced. One particularly poignant moment came years later, when a young law student approached Judge Carter after a lecture. "Your story is the reason I decided to pursue law," the student said, tears welling in her eyes. "It reminded me that our differences can be a source of strength, not division." Lisa smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose in that moment. This was why she continued the work, to inspire the next generation to carry the torch of justice forward. For Officer Mitchell, a similarly powerful moment occurred when a teenage boy from the youth program he had volunteered with for years said, "I didn't think I'd ever trust a cop. But you showed me that some people are willing to change." James felt a mixture of gratitude and responsibility, knowing that his actions, both past and present, had left a lasting impression on the people he sought to serve. In the end, the encounter that began with doubt and mistrust had evolved into a story of growth, accountability, and collaboration. It reminded everyone who followed it that change doesn't come from one person or one moment, but from a collective willingness to learn, to listen, and to act. As we reflect on this journey, we're reminded that justice isn't a destination, it's a path we walk together, shaped by the choices we make and the values we uphold. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and working tirelessly to ensure that dignity, respect, and fairness are more than just ideals, they're realities for everyone. If this story moved you, challenged you, or inspired you, we encourage you to share it. Join the conversation in the comments below. What steps do you think we can take to create a more just and equitable society? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can continue this journey with us. Together, we can shine a light on the stories that matter and push for the change we wish to see. This is more than just a story. It's a call to action. A reminder that every encounter, no matter how small, has the power to shape the world around us.